Hare today, gone tomorrow. About 10 years ago, Barb and I built a house on a ridge about 8 miles south of town. We enjoy the peace and solitude, and especially the various critters who have either stopped in for a visit or taken up residence nearby. White-tailed deer, wild turkey, hawks and eagles, coons, skunks, few foxes, and some say there are bears around too, although we've never seen any. There are also rabbits, wild rabbits, and thereby hangs a tale. Shortly after we'd settled in, Barb became enamored with those little cuddly-looking guys that seemed to be everywhere. She, of course, wanted to make pets of them, but when I explained that they were wild, she determined that she would raise some of her own. So sure enough, we paid a visit to a fellow who raised domestic rabbits, and another visit, and it wasn't long before we had about 30 of the little fur balls. The population suddenly ballooned to about 45 with just 3 litters, so it was quickly decided that individual cages were in order. And guess who got to build those individual cages? But if you could have seen her eyes when they were all settled in, I must say you would also have agreed it was worth the effort. Each, of course, had a name and was carefully greeted each morning and played with. Their food and water had to be looked after as well. Guess who got to look after the feed and the water? But hey, Barb was happy and the rabbits seemed to be too. Although I must admit that from the outset I had misgivings about putting them in cages. Barb chided me that my misgivings centered more around building the cages than around the welfare of her rabbits. Funny how her intuition just cuts right to the quick at times. Well, anyway, we settled into life with Lepus. Then one afternoon, late in summer, we arrived from work to find a couple of wild dogs departing the scene, having torn into the cages and ravaged her beloved pets. About 2/3 had been killed outright, and 2 more died the following day. Wasn't long before a collie pup came home with us from the kennel, and when we determined she might get lonely, a boy collie joined our little family as well. Now, both Brandy and Cody were deliberately raised with the rabbits, learning to protect them as they would Barb or myself. Time and again our collies have proven their worth. Not only were we never bothered by wild dogs, but on one occasion, when Barb had one of her rabbits out of the cage petting it, it jumped from her arms and took off. Brandy and Cody leaped into action, chasing it, one on either side of the frenzied creature until it tired. Cody walked over and simply put his paw on top of it, pinning it to the ground until we arrived to pick it up, frightened but completely unharmed. However, this custodial concern of the 2 collies for Barb's rabbits would soon turn on us. As time went on, I really did become concerned about them being in cages. A couple came down with sore hocks from the metal flooring, and, well, they just all seemed to eye the woods with a longing that said they'd be much happier in the wild. Now, these were domestic rabbits, but while never having studied animal husbandry, I was sure they would have no problem with producing hybrid progeny. It took several months to convince Barb that her brood should be freed. But after laying a number of guilt trips on her about how no animal should be caged and that we might not be able to pet them, but we would no doubt see a number of their offspring around the property, she finally, against her better judgment, consented to turning them loose. So came the big day. Now, perhaps I should have tried it one at a time, but thinking we would see them scatter into the woods and not wanting to give Barb a chance to reconsider, I opened all the cages at once. To a rabbit, they cautiously took that first tentative step to freedom, and then, en masse, as if someone had already called the play in the huddle, they shot straight out of those cages and directly beneath the shed where I do my woodworking. Barb just looked at me with a jaundiced eye while I explained that, well, they just needed a halfway house, somewhere to hang out until they could work up the courage to tackle the great outdoors. Next morning, we had rabbits all over our front yard, eating Barb's flowers and bulbs and small bushes. I winced when I saw Brandy and Cody laying in the yard watching as the rabbits hopped right past them on the way to the next floral delicacy. There was no way I could now get the dogs to chase away the very rabbits they'd been raised to protect. Shooing them away lasted only minutes, and of course we weren't even home during the day, so Barb's flower beds were being decimated at a feverish pitch. I don't mind telling you the temperature in our house dropped more than a few degrees. Not only was emotional frostbite a real possibility, but I was beginning to believe that either Cody or Brandy just might have to share his or her domicile. After more than a month of fighting this losing battle, and just when we thought it couldn't get worse, it got worse. Out from under the shed now appeared a whole host of cute little baby rabbits, just as ravenously hungry as their parents. Not only had these ungrateful furballs refused to leave the yard, they'd been eating by day and procreating by night. We were being overrun by rodents. At this point, Barb's "if looks could kill" stares far outnumbered any comments other than, "You made this mess, you fix it." There was nothing left for it but to trap those rabbits. Never entered my mind to do anything to harm them. It would have been my hide nailed to the shed wall, and besides, I may be dumb, but I'm not crazy. So trap them I did with the same old box, carrot, and string creation we all learned as kids. 19 rabbits, one at a time. But even Barb agreed that once they'd tasted freedom, it broke her heart to see them caged again. So she proceeded to give them away. Oh, not to just anybody. Oh, no siree. She interviewed the prospective owners, and only when she had concluded an investigation which would have made the FBI proud and was convinced that they would get the best of care did she agree to give up parental rights. We're now down to just one rabbit, a male. He's one of the babies, the result of the decadent debauchery under my woodworking shed, but he's not in a cage. I fenced in a pretty good-sized area behind the shed where he can run and play. He seems happy enough, but once in a while he seems to turn a hungry gaze toward Barb's tulips, and sometimes he stares at my woodworking shed with nostalgia in his eye. Or is it lust?